Drone JT62 back on the Makerfarm Pegasus 12. In this video we're going to look at installing the heat bed belts, the solution that I am going to try to come up with to install proximity sensors rather than the mechanical stops. There's also a piece of cork that's supposed to go under here. I purchased that from Makerfarm when I ordered the kit. I know it goes underneath there somewhere, but I didn't recall in the instructions how it says to mount that. So once I find that out, I'll go ahead and post that in this video. In the lead screw installation in the last video, this is the final installation of that with the screws. Since this is such a rigid structural part now, rather than using those 5mm all thread, it takes some alignment and measurements to make sure that you get this right so that it doesn't bind. That includes up at the top. You have to measure the distance. You can't really see it in here, but from down here, I took a measurement here and then measured up here, basically with a square, adjustable square. Make sure it was the same from top to bottom. It looked like that way when I initially installed them, but it was way off, so I had to make some minor adjustments as far as you might have to cant the stepper this way or that way, you know, to get it right. And then since I did machine come on, focus for me there, slots in there, then, you know, that's kind of pretty well adjustable. So we'll continue on with this. This is something you're interested in. It's coming right up. Here's the bottom belts for the Y-axis installed. Pretty straightforward. You just cut this belt to 39 inches and get a tie wrap, fold them over, and cinch it down. Make sure they're tight, but you know, I'm going to say straight off, I'm not a fan of that at all, but it is what it is. Need to cinch those down, make sure they're not going to come out, and make sure the teeth are aligned. Don't put more than like 3/4 of an inch on your first one when it's wrapped around, or you're not going to have enough when you get up to this side, or it's going to be difficult to try to hold that with tension on it and get that tie wrap on. And then this just goes up to the bracket up here. There's some things you must positively take note of, and that is these brackets. They have you install these brackets loosely. In the first part of your assembly, and then adjust them later. There's a problem here, and the bolt right here, if I can get that to focus, is too long, because you're going to have to slide this assembly left or right, I mean ever so slightly, and adjust it so this belt will track straight. And the problem is that bolt is so long in that, let's see if I can focus that there, it covers that screw. So you can't get an Allen wrench on it and tighten it and loosen it. And that's a problem. And it's a problem in that these bearings up here need to be positioned correctly. You'll notice that there's nubs on the inside, alignment nubs that go into this extrusion track to keep it centered. Make positively sure that these bearings are not contacting those nubs. Push it down just enough so that these bearings will rotate freely. Or I'll show you what's going to happen. You're going to end up with this. You see that little ring right there? That is part of the snap ring. In my pursuit to line this up, I believe it was rotating. Lucky there was an extra bearing in here. I'm going to have to order some more for sure. I believe it shaved it down and took that ring off. And I would have never known that. Next thing, this would have fell and bound up. Make positively sure that you just slide that down. Do not, I repeat, do not slide these bearings as far up in that adjustment hole forward as they can go. Your best bet would be to slide them all the way to the bottom, which I should have done, and that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut that bottom tie wrap and slide that bolt all the way down that way, so I know that it's not contacting and preventing those bearings from rotating, or that's going to be the end result. So, like I said, you're going to have to slide this left and right until you can get this to, this is as good as I could get it to track, to where otherwise, if you don't take your time with this, it'll track over here and the belt will rub this way, it'll rub that way. So you're going to find yourself moving those brackets over once you get them very close, a 1/16 to a 32nd of an inch at a time, until you get it to where it tracks straight. So we'll move on to the Y-axis belt. I'll get that installed. Let you know what kind of problems, if any, with that, and we'll come back. Incidentally, I ended up cutting that bolt down to 770 inches. You can convert that to millimeters if you want, but 770, and it gives you clearance so that you can get an Allen wrench on that screw. Otherwise, you're going to have major problems. So we'll get the X-axis belt on and move it back. Here's the X-axis belt installed. It's done similar to the exact same way as the Y-axis here. Just make loops. Make sure you don't make them too big or you won't have enough. It's just barely enough to get these on here. Let me get a shot on the back side here. Basically, the loops just, these bolts go through and there's lock nuts on the back side. You can see them right there. You can see how much material I had left. You'll probably have to take the nut off in order to slide that on there. And then the final portion is these should be loose. And this is where you're going to take up the slack for this belt. And make sure you don't forget to tighten down the set screws here. You're doing a little alignment. I'm not sure if I can see that through there, but on the idler back there, just make sure it's not rubbing on one side or the other. You might not be able to get it perfectly centered. I talked about this one, the Y-axis. I still had a little bit of a problem. I couldn't get it perfect. It won't stay perfect. It seems to want to go over to the right side a bit. And if I make an adjustment and look at the belts from underneath, they're out of alignment. So I just line the belts up and let it go from there. Just so long as it's not rubbing left or right. So that's the best I could do with it at this point. So we'll move on to the installation of the heat bed, and we'll be right back. To install the heat bed, you're going to need 4 3mm lock nuts, nylon, 4 M3 by 25s, 4 springs, heat bed, and the cork board. The insulation material just sits on here, and the heat bed just sits right on top of that. I think I may have to trim these corners out. This is just sitting here like this. You can see them, but may have to nip the corners just so I can get the screw holes through, or just slice them off with an X-Acto. So we'll go ahead and get this installed. Let you take a look. We'll talk about it and move on from there. So to install the heat blanket or insulation material, what I did was just put the spring in the corners, traced around it with a pen, and then with an up and down motion just saw the thing around. Don't try to cut it. You know how fragile cork is, and you don't want to split this stuff. I suggest that you buy this from Makerfarm when you purchase the kit. It's only a couple of dollars. The gas you're going to have to use to run around and try to find it somewhere else is not worth it. Just order it from them if you order this kit. You could use a hole punch that you use a hammer on. I have some, mine are at work. Most people don't have those, so use an X-Acto knife. Get a sharp X-Acto knife, just trim the corners out. So this is the final installation of the heat bed. Pretty close, I should say. I need to tighten down these screws here. I emailed Colin last night. That guy is like crazy as far as getting back to you. He replied within like 3 minutes, and it was like 9 o'clock here, and I live in California, and he's in Utah. I'm like, what? So crazy. So anyway, he says the tension on that is not that much. You don't want it to warp this heat bed. But it has a bow in it anyway, so I'm guessing the glass is going to take care of that. But at any rate, you'll probably tighten these down like a 1/4 inch, until you just get some tensions on the springs, and you can measure around. You can't go too far anyway because of the relay on the back. It's pretty close to touching the plate anyhow. And you don't want to jam that down, so you're going to have to keep an eye. I can't give you the exact dimension. We talked about maybe going over the end stops with proximity sensors. We're going to cut that on this video. I don't want to make this too long. We'll cover that in another. Probably the next video, because we got to do the LCD installation. These end stops. We've already done the Z-axis. And the last section of that is the hot end. So, just a note here, this heat blanket, where the screw heads are on this side from where you built up the plate for the bearing holders. There's the other screw up there for the end stop. It's sitting vertical. There's one in the center there for the Y-axis bracket. You're gonna have to make some cutouts with that. You can Dremel them out. Don't cut all the way through. You don't have to, but just enough so that this cork sits flat. Otherwise, it's going to be buckled and wavy all the way around. And you know how cork is; it likes to roll up on you on the ends anyway. When it gets near heat. So if it's going to form a permanent set, you're going to want it to be flat. So you're probably going to want to do that. It's probably not necessary, but I did it. If you want to, you can. So we'll close this out. The next video we'll talk about and see how in depth we have to get into the LCD. I may make a front panel for it. It doesn't come with one. We'll look at it and maybe machine something out, and we'll get to that. So, again, thanks for watching.